I must confess right at the beginning that my presentation is not as organized as Dr. Siegel's. I jump from one point to another, typical of somebody who is more in the field than doing research like Dr. Siegel. So I will focus mainly on security at the beginning, but I will also bring the element of governance and rule of law. At first, when I was invited, I was very excited and felt really honored to come and join you in here. But on the one hand, as I was thinking about security, what I was going to present to you, I was thinking, these are the authorities on security. What am I going to say that is new to them? So I thought my presentation also is going to provoke some reaction from you, since at the end of it all, we will be having some discussions. But let me start with the good news about Africa. Africa is actually doing better than many people may realize in terms of security and economy. Today, despite some exceptions, armed conflict is actually much less than what it was some years ago. We will go into the data later. This improvement of the security situation helps set the stage for rapid economic growth of 5 to 6% per year for the last 15 years. As a result of this sustained growth, extreme poverty has fallen significantly since 1990. I hate to quote this, but I picked it from the World Bank. That is, poverty has fallen down by 40%. That was done some time back. So even in my mind, I'm not sure I should quote this figure, because when you look at the reality, it might not reflect such a huge drop in poverty. Africa's growth can no longer be explained by global demand for its commodities. 2/3 of Africa's growth over the last decade has come from increased domestic demand for goods and services in thriving sectors such as telecoms, financial services, manufacturing, and construction, which, even if you go to South Sudan, which at the moment is experiencing problem, the construction industry is still thriving. As a result, inflows of private investment dwarfs international aid. What I mean by that is, if you look at most countries, they're trying to raise their own revenue and not depend on aid like it used to be for a long time. So there is improvement in Africa, but we still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go, although we've made positive steps towards gender parity, and the continent is moving towards universal primary education, which is very, very important. The spread of HIV/AIDS is in decline, and the number of deaths from tuberculosis and malaria is falling. Democracy is extending its roots, as we have seen in Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Nigeria in the recent past. Other countries like Cote d'Ivoire have emerged from the abyss of conflict and are making strides towards a better and more democratic future. Despite the gains, I go back to the hardship we still have a lot of challenges because we still have tens and thousands of people who are internally displaced, or, as Dr. Siegel said, who are refugees, big contributors of refugees to the Western world. We still have people who live in abject poverty, who are lucky if they have one meal a day. So progress in Africa generally remains uneven, because what is happening is that whatever we have, the distribution is uneven. Usually, whatever has been gained is shared among the few elite, and it does not really trickle down to the grassroots. And this is part of the cause of the problem we have today. So we still have a lot of people who are impoverished. So external forces are taking advantage of these shortcomings. We cannot ignore from Mauritania in the west and Somalia in the east, the flag of jihad is growing. More than a dozen sub-Saharan African countries are concerned, and tens of thousands of their people are suffering as a result of this jihadi. Boko Haram actually killed more people last year than the Islamic State. Attacks in many places are daily or a weekly occurrence. What is worrying is that the local extremist groups are now linking up to each other cross borders and even go global franchise like Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. Precisely because of these affiliations, these conflicts are generally seen through prism, like the global war on Islamic. These neglects have nothing to do with Islam. We all know that unemployment of young men is one of the drivers of radicalization. In fact, not too long ago, I was in Oslo attending the Oslo Forum. This is Senior Mediators Forum. And we were listening to the genesis of Boko Haram, the genesis of also Islamic State. A lot of it also has to do, I mentioned jobs, but also marginalization. We're listening to the group that came from the Sahel region in the from Mali. The Sahel, the Tuaregs are talking of marginalization, and that is driving some of the conflict in their regions. So it's not, as such, a Muslim problem. World Bank survey in 2011 showed that about 40% of those who joined rebel movements say they were motivated by lack of jobs. In Africa, as elsewhere, the answer does not lie purely in military response that fails to deal with root causes of disaffection and violence. What I'm trying to say in here, it needs a 2 or 3 pronged approach. That while you deal with military, it is very important to also address the underlying causes of these problems. I almost preach this all the time. You cannot have peace and security without inclusive development, the rule of law, and the respect for human rights. These are the 3 pillars of all successful societies. It is largely because these 3 pillars are quite fragile in some parts of Africa. That is why we are all still experiencing instability and violence. The truth that economic growth in Africa over the last 15 years, though impressive as it is, it has never been sufficient nor inclusive. In fact, Africa has become the world's 2nd most unequal continent, according to the African Development Bank. Too much of the growth has enriched a narrow elite, and not enough has been spent on infrastructure, health, nor in education. It is no coincidence, therefore, that Boko Haram originated in one of the poorest and most deprived areas of the continent. Not only does wealth not trickle down, but it is barely taxed, depriving the state of resources to provide for public services. An African Union report estimated that up to 1/4 of the continent's GDP is siphoned off every year through corruption. I think Dr. Siegel mentioned this. The trafficking of drugs is another problem, which creates an especially difficult challenge. Drug money is insidious and invasive. It corrodes political institutions. So we must also focus and try to track where these monies go, where they come from and where they go. And oftentimes, we lock up the minor offenders while the big fish are left to swim free. The fight against violent rebel the fight against violent rebel movements is necessary and require enhanced inter-Africa as well as international cooperation. But this is not enough because the challenge of security in Africa is often a political challenge revolving around acquisition and use of power. And Dr. Siegel talked quite a bit on the governance aspect, so I'm not going to go into that, but a lot of it is lack of, like I said, marginalization and acquisition of power and use of power. African leaders, like leaders everywhere, must remember that they are at the service of their citizens and not the other way around. They have a mandate given to them in trust by their people who can also take it away from them if they are found wanting and have overstayed their welcome. Let me stop here a little bit. There's a concept note that I've written. This is about democracy. Do our people still have faith and confidence in democracy when votes are bought, elections are rigged, and sometimes constitutions are amended in favor of the person in power? Do our people have confidence that elections, democracy or elections will harness accountability when leaders take all and they don't want to share with the people? So this is something that I would also, maybe during this course, I could share this concept paper. We need to look at whether we should not start thinking of fresh ideas about democracy so that we can have trust and confidence in the elections. Because more and more we believed for a long time that democracy was a panacea to conflict. In fact, if you look at all African countries, they're all democracies. But even with those democracies, we still have instability in the continent. So we need to question ourselves whether we should not start thinking afresh of what kind of democracy we want, which will work, which will be respected, whereby leaders can be accountable to their people. The other thing I wanted to say was about the kind of leaders that we're craving for that can help us prevent all these problems we have. Leaders who can listen to local solutions. Thank you. Leaders that give freedom to press where there's rule of law, where it is respected by the authorities and not people are punished arbitrarily. So looking forward, I see 5 challenges as Africa fashions its role in the global security order. First, at the global level, Africa must have a strong and consistent voice at the pinnacle of the international security architecture, that is the Security Council. What I'm seeing is the regional organizations with African Union, they're doing a lot of work in combating insecurity. I do not see why we cannot have people of the continent sitting in the Security Council to discuss the security problems, because with the experience that the Africans have acquired, I think it merits recognition and therefore sitting in the Security Council. But until that can be accomplished, Africa must ensure that its position on the international security concerns, and not just African issues, are carefully coordinated and well presented. Secondly, at the regional level, we should recognize and applaud the work of African Union and the sub-regional organizations, which have acquired considerable and commendable experience in mounting peace operations. Third, looking to the national level, the most urgent challenges is to create jobs for the continent's youth. According to the World Bank, 11 million young people are expected to enter Africa's labor market every year for the next decade. If these young people cannot find jobs and do not believe in the future, they will be tempted to join rebel movements, as well as other crimes. We should invest in them, harness their talent, and ensure that the next generation of leaders will do better than we have done. Another major challenge lies in building confidence in the integrity of the electoral process. I've touched on that. Elections should be the vehicle for popular choice, in which the winner does not take all and the losers do not lose all. Those who win must recognize that they do not have a license to rule without restraint or remain in office forever. Let us not confuse legality with legitimacy. Elections that meet legal form but fail the test of integrity are only sham. Security in the home and in the streets depends in good measure on our security forces. We must invest in them, but also make them fully accountable as part of our democratic societies. They must be trained to protect the individual and his or her family and property, to earn their trust and work with people. Give me a couple of minutes just to mention something about the role of women in this. When I look back, I'm actually quite impressed. When I embarked on this work in 1988 to try to end rebellion in northern Uganda. I even remember the rebels saying, this is not a woman's call. This is a man. We feel insulted that you should be here trying to talk peace to us. I remember even women did not have the confidence. Even me, I did not bring in women to listen to them. Even in the post-conflict reconstruction program, I was only dealing with men for a long time. A lot of strides has been made to bring women in the fold, to listen to them, to give them space. I'm proud to be sitting with a general right here that was never heard of way back in the 80s when I was involved in peace process. But at the same time, that conviction that women can do more has not quite sunk in. When I go for peace talks, women are taken in because it is demanded that 30% of the participants have to be women. Women are taken in as not takers. But what even disturbs me more in the role of women will be loyal to their particular group and not necessarily for the cause of women. What I am looking for are women who will stand up, irrespective of their political affiliation, irrespective of who they support, but further the cause of women because it's been tested in quite a number of countries, that women can do as much as men, whether it's governance, rule of law, they are there. But oftentimes, even at the UN, they will insist there are not enough women. There are not enough women who are qualified to do some work, which is usually very disappointing. And I'm hoping that this is something that will be discussed further. The role of women, we've proved ourselves, and I think we can do more. Thank you very much.